You're very welcome. Oh, hang on. It says my microphone is muted. Why would that be?
Oh, I did it. I muted it because you can't hear me. So I've got you on the phone and I've got your video on, but you're muted through the computer because otherwise you can't hear me. So I don't know what's going on, but we got it worked out now. So here's I've got so many questions for you, Greg. I don't want to keep you forever, but I don't want to get hung up too much on the Maya Kowalski case. But for one, congratulations on that case, on what a huge win. I think we all here at this program, we covered it every day. We feel like we've been through a war with you. I can't even imagine how you feel.
It has been. A war is a good way to describe it. It was simply the most overwhelming piece of litigation in my career, and that's going back 4 decades and a lot of interesting cases. But this one, what do you say? 52 summary judgment motions. We're at 3,600 docket entries, and your average medical malpractice case has what, 250 to 300? Yeah. And they're still at it. We're now trying to get our final judgment entered, and of course they're objecting to everything all the time. So we've got even more fun ahead of us.
So it's not really over for you. How are you feeling about the appeals process? Are they filing that immediately? Is that happening, or do you think there's a chance that they'll settle?
It's very interesting when you look at the numbers and the practicality of it. Megan, I don't know. Did you ever see the verdict form? Has anybody sent you a copy of that verdict form to see what it's like?
Yes.
It's 40 pages, and it asks individual questions as to each event. Each time Maya was battered, each time she was falsely imprisoned, everything that happened, there is a separate entry to say yes or no, was there battery, was there false imprisonment, and then the dollar amount of the damages, and then a check for yes or no, was it sufficient to warrant punitive damages. And the reason that that's important, it makes the case almost impossible to go back for a retrial, because if the appellate court agreed with any of their arguments, which we do not believe in any way, shape, or form it will, it's a matter of slicing off that one part of it. And this begs an even more interesting question, which is, with interest running at, at $22,000 a day, what is the cost-benefit analysis for the defense? If the appeal costs them $30 million in interest, what is it really? And I don't think it would be that much, but it would be, a lot of money. And the question is, would that be worth the amount that they could ever get in a remitter? And I don't think that there's going to be a remitter in this. So I feel very confident about it, and I'm confident not only in the factual, but also in the procedural aspect.
I got into a pretty heated discussion argument with a couple of attorneys who disagreed with your team about the fact that it's medical malpractice or not. I think it is. I think the standard has been met easily. But what would you say to people looking at this case and analyzing it and saying, no, everything else is right, false imprisonment, battery, that's all right, but it's not medical malpractice? What is the deal with attorneys who are so hesitant to say that what we saw is what we saw?
Well, I think it comes down to the wishy-washy way that Johns Hopkins portrayed Maya's diagnosis, and particularly beginning that October 7th date, which, if you heard my closing argument, was what I thought was pretty key here. Because remember, Maya had been in over 17 times. I don't know, she saw something like 54 different Johns Hopkins doctors. And once Dr. Kirkpatrick at the RSD Institute made the diagnosis of CRPS, everybody then went along with it. They went, it was, eureka moment by a lot of the physicians that had been treating Maya. Well, this is what it is. And it all made sense at that point until October 7th. And they went in And like I said, something happened there, and you had a bunch of doctors who really had no idea what they were talking about. They had no experience with CRPS, and no experience with Maya symptoms or treatments. And so they changed the diagnosis every place except a few places in the medical records. So I think that people were focusing and saying, aha, they agreed it was CRPS. But in fact, everywhere else, they held it out to be conversion disorder. So the medical malpractice was taking a documented identification of this and diagnosis of CRPS, and then turning it into a psychosomatic condition, conversion disorder, and then, of course, Munchausen on the part of Beata. We were not allowed to proceed as to medical malpractice as to Beata, which brought up an interesting question. This was a pediatric hospital, and yet they were diagnosing an adult psychiatric condition. So there's, I think, sort of prima facie malpractice on that. But the court said, no, that's not what this case is about. It's about Maya. And so now what we had was the hospital coming out in every public record and accept parts of their internal medical records saying that this was conversion disorder. And it's all over it. So the medical malpractice is the misdiagnosis of CRPS as conversion disorder.
And also, one of the things you said during your closing arguments, and this was a more lighthearted moment, but you said at one point, the Shopkins thing drove you friggin' nuts. And that's
I love that
quote. I did too, because it drove us nuts here too. I don't know if you know this, but we were making memes about John Shopkins. We started calling them John Shopkins. Look, here's a meme brought to you by Pfizer and Hasbro. John Shopkins.
I loved it. I thought that was fantastic. Somebody showed me one of your memes there, and it was John Shopkins, all criminals,
all prisoners,
all prisoners hospital.
Here's another one. Here's another one.
It's well, if you really being in the courtroom and having them parade these nurses in who claim to be the hand of Jesus. And,
literally the hands and feet of Jesus. Yes.
Literally the hand of Jesus. Well, hand of Jesus, could you please hand her the keys out of her cell and let her get out of there? They just really overdid it. And I was very serious about my refrain, I guess you'd call it, that they just don't get it. And they still don't. They just can't imagine that they did anything wrong here. But the Shopkins thing, that kind of summarized it all. We could do whatever we wanted to her, ruin her life, take her mother's life, and yet we did get her Shopkins.
To me, it was like, you don't know anything about this girl. All you can say is Shopkins. She liked Shopkins. But every kid that year loved Shopkins because it was the hot toy of the year. You could have said that about every single 10-year-old little girl. My kids were into it at the time as well. So it doesn't tell you anything about Maya Kowalski. That's what bothered me the most. It was just about some stupid thing they latched onto to pretend they knew her.
Right, and they never really took the time to get to know Maya, because this narrative started about her that you couldn't trust anything she said. And so remember, I refuse to believe that there wasn't a narrative going on at every shift change among the social workers and Sally Smith. Kathy Beatty stayed there, the social worker. But as to the nurses, you just know everybody was saying, now that's the Munchausen kid, that's the conversion kid. Don't trust anything she says. She thinks she's in pain, but we think she can really walk. I mean, they said as much at different points in the record. And
yeah, we have a meme for them too. They're the Munchie Bunch.
Quack. I love it. you know what? That was brilliant. I'm going to have to go back and watch a lot of your shows. I did catch one of them, I think. I laughed when I read them. It was a point where I. That's right.
Dr.
I just had dinner with Joe the other night. I'll tell him. He said, "Hey,
He's
and
the
his hair was perfect."
greatest. He's
Yeah, he
Dr.
is.
Goodhair. He was great. He was a terrific witness, and the chat just loved him. The chat just thought he was fantastic. All right, so here's a question, and you mentioned it just a second ago, but you, after the jury verdict was found that J. Hatch was 100% liable on every claim, the defense went on television still claiming that Maya's a liar. How will they ever learn this lesson, Greg? Are they ever going to get it? And how many lawsuits will it take?
That's a very good question, Megan. I searched for that the whole trial. Generally speaking, there comes a point in a trial, and I do a lot more defense work than I do plaintiff's work. So there's a point in the trial when, if you're an experienced defense attorney, you realize that, or a plaintiff's attorney for that matter, but you realize that the case is not going your way. And although you have to go through the motions and you'll do your best as counsel, but it just, you know. And somehow these folks just kept drilling it into each other's heads that everything every one of our witnesses said was a lie, and everything that Maya said was a lie, and Jack and Kyle. All of our doctors were lying. All of the independent witnesses, which I don't know if you noticed or not, but we loaded up our case with independent witnesses. The people that didn't owe us anything, that didn't work for us, and we had no control over. We loaded our case with those because we thought it was important to the jury. And still they thought all of those folks lied. All the physical therapists, all the independent physicians. I don't know what it's going to take. I don't know what it's going to take. I'm hopeful that the appellate court, which has already seen this case once, I hope you know, I hope that if they do right, that they make some of the points here that need to be made about what happened, because it's just overwhelming that after all that they're still after the Kowalskis. Who does that?
It is overwhelming. Is it true that you've never done a medical malpractice case before?
Oh, I've done medical malpractice cases before. It's just that they were earlier in my career, and most of them were for the defense. See, I started out working for a medical malpractice defense attorney back in the 80s. And so I had a couple of second chairs there, and then I had one first chair, but this was like in 1988 or 89. And I hadn't done any really since then, at least as far as I can remember.
Wow.
And and getting back into it. But I was fortunate. I had a number of friends from different parts of my practice over the years that I could call up and say, "Hey, look, I'm getting back into this. What's the score now on this issue and that issue?" And I managed, and we had, of course, with Nick there and Samantha, we had a real good team that I knew enough about it to spot the basic issues and to get us down the right track. And I had enough good friends that were directing me to some of the nuances. But yeah.
Well, you nailed it.
I hadn't tried a medical malpractice case in probably 25 years.
Wow. Okay, well, I read the civil action that you filed against Sally Smith and Suncoast. I read that last night. It's beautiful, especially the part about the violations of the First, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendments. These cases do not get filed or heard often enough, in my opinion. Now, that one settled. Is that right? They settled?
Right. We settled that one about a year and a half ago. Good defense counsel there, and Brian Haskell, and he recognized the problems with the case, and he was a vigorous advocate for his client, but he got it. He understood the underlying problems in trying to force this case to trial, and so we were able to work with him, which is the diametrically the opposite of what was going on with defense counsel. And I've got some very strong opinions about how this case got to where it is, and I would encourage anybody who really wants to understand what happened to go and read some of those transcripts from the underlying shelter action. And
see we're reading them on my channel. We've been reading through them like a dramatic reading on my channel. We're starting number 1 tomorrow night, but we already did the last one a couple weeks ago in 2 parts, and we're going to go through every single one of them now that I have them all. So I appreciate that they were on the docket. I read a letter that you wrote to the Suncoast Council, and Greg, I can only hope that I can get an advocate as savage as you one day if I should need it. Did they settle after you sent this letter? That the last line of it is so great. It says, "The next settlement move will be dictated by the sounding of the buzzer that the jury has reached a verdict."
A little bit of hyperbole there, but yeah, that was the message I wanted to give. I don't know. I felt that, but to answer your specific question, that settled the case.
Yeah.
That settled the case.
And also, just so you people know,
get it done within a matter of a week or two.
Just so you people know, Greg also attached a headline of his last huge win, $70 million that he got in against GE. And that was attached to the letter. Like, if you don't believe me, check out this headline. I will crush you in court.
It's very strange for me because there was I'm here in Jacksonville. I live in Ponte Vedra, but and I've been a member of the Jacksonville Bar now for coming on 40 years, and there's been no press or media up here. I am an unknown in my hometown, and to a certain extent in the Florida bar, because a lot of my verdicts have been Portland, Oregon, and Connecticut, California, a lot of places around. And one thing I found the segue is that I've had a hard time because of the size of our firm. Only 10, 11 lawyers, and because I do a lot of defense work, so I don't trumpet myself too much. I think that people come in and they grossly underestimate us, and they don't do any due diligence on their opponent, which is the first thing I do. If I've got a major case and I figure there's even a chance of it going to trial, or even if it's not, I will dig up as much information as I can on my opponent. I'll call lawyers that have tried cases against them. I'll find out what I'm dealing with here, because I don't understand how you can effectively prosecute or defend your case if you don't. And that rarely happens. I don't see that happen too much on the other side of me, at least thus far in my career. Maybe this case will change it.
Well, speaking of more cases, so we have been looking at the Kushers case. We've been looking at their story that was reported on USA Today, and I've read through the docket, at least as much of it as I can. The Kushers, of course, have had a very similar run-in with Dr. Sally Smith and Jay Hatch, as well as other hospitals, where their son's birth trauma was they were accused of child abuse. Now, you've filed suit in 2021. It appears to me that the suit is now hung up because they are NICA, which I've explained to the audience. They know what NICA is. NICA is appealing the award that the Kushers were given. They qualified for NICA, and NICA says no, they don't want to give them the money. What the heck, Greg?
This is rich. So every doctor pays in to, every doctor that does this kind of work. In any event, a lot of doctors pay into this fund, which has got hundreds of millions of dollars there to compensate patients. And in our case, I thought the facts were just so clear, and it was another instance of Sally Smith absolutely misrepresenting things and then people following along. and listening to somebody who's not a radiologist in a radiology case and not a neurologist in a neurology issue. And I couldn't figure out what was going on in this. We won at the hearing level. Administrative law judge, I don't know if you read his order, which I thought, of course I won, but I thought his order was very well presented and brought in. It was an extensive order. I've got it here in front of me. What is it? It's like 37 pages citing to all of the facts. And I couldn't believe it when they said, well, we're going to appeal it. I said, appeal what? What? There's a finding here. The AJ judge has broad discretion, very broad discretion, and you don't have any facts to counter this. No, we just think that Williams' degree of impairment isn't enough. I said, isn't it enough? The kid's having trouble moving one of his legs and arms. Have you ever seen him run? I actually have a video. I mean, it's incredibly sad what happened to this little boy. And for them to come in and say, well, yes, there was neurological injury, but we just don't think it was enough of a neurological injury. I was like, what do you want? For him to just be laying in a bed drooling? Is that what's necessary for this? And that wasn't the standard either.
No.
So now these poor people have been going on. The reply brief was filed November 2nd, 2022. So it's been over a year since it's all been submitted to the first district. And, these poor folks, this all went on in 2018. So now here we are. They've had the hearing. They've been waiting for a year and a half. And if you go back to 2018, what is that now? 5 years for justice, like the Kowalskis. And it breaks my heart that they've had to go through all this. If they find, and they're also, I guess, attacking whether it qualifies under the statute. I guess if it doesn't, then our companion case filed in the circuit court but stayed, I guess that reactivates. So
what happens with the appeal now? Where does it go? Because it was in front of an administrative law judge. Where does the appeal go?
The appeal is pending before the First District Court of Appeals in Tallahassee, Florida. At least I think it's a Tallahassee.
About how long is that going to go on, do you think?
Well, I've had a lot of arguments before the first, because Jacksonville, the circuit court here is in the First District and Fourth Judicial Circuit. And it's been up before them. Like I said, the briefing closed on November 2nd, 2022. So here we are, a year following the last brief, the reply brief being filed. So it's been before the court for a year. We have not seen a notice of oral argument. We called over there last week. The judges are very busy. They're still trying to dig their way out of, to a certain extent, the COVID mess. And so we know how hard they're working, and we know that they're backload there. But boy, it sure is tough on the Kushners to be in this limbo. It's one of the unfortunate aspects of our system here. So
when I was going through the docket of the NICA filings and stuff, it seems that NICA was allowed to seal their response to your petition. Is there a reason why that is sealed and unavailable to the public? We can't see why they're appealing and what their argument is.
You got me. And you know what? I had forgotten about that, Megan. It's something I should look into. Florida, it's government in the sunshine, and
that's a government. Those are public funds. How dare they?
Exactly.
How dare they keep their reasoning for keeping public funds away from a family who qualified for them and sealing them? What kind of judge? I'm sorry, but what kind of judge seals that information from the public? I want that.
I encourage anyone that's interested. We would be holding, if it was a matter of HIPAA or confidentiality of young Williams' records, we're the ones that hold that privilege, and we haven't asserted it. So where's their basis? Where's their grounds for that? But let me say that is one aspect of the case I haven't looked at in a year. So I guess that's something I need to go back and check out, see if there's anything that can be done.
I would love that, because in order to report on it properly, I need to see what is NICA's explanation for why they're appealing, and it's totally sealed, which is interesting to me because none of your filings are sealed. So you're not hiding anything, but what are they hiding is the question.
Probably embarrassment. This whole NICA setup. Let me tell you what my concern is with all of these. In so many of these, and I think it's true in both of these cases, the defense counsel are effectively in charge of how far the litigation goes. And what's different if you have sophisticated insurance carriers with senior VPs of claims who've seen it all, senior adjusters, they come to a point where they just say, no, that's it. Look, we're not going to continue to pay you however many hundreds of thousands of dollars a month or year, continuing this thing on. You told us you were going to win. You didn't win. Let's put this thing to bed. In these situations, there is nobody that's really in charge of this. And so when the defense counsel says, yeah, I know we lost, but we're going to get them this time, there's nobody standing back and saying, well, wait now, what basis do you have for asserting, yeah, we know you're going to replay the same arguments, and we know you think you can make them better, but you've had your day in court, we've had our day in court, and the plaintiff won. So why, again, are you telling us we should spend another $1 million this next year with your firm to keep this thing up in the air? I don't. My defense clients never. I got to find some of these clients because my clients laugh at me, saying, "No, Anderson, no, we're not going to pay you for another chance."
Yeah, so that brings me to another question I had. We heard that there may have been a lot of personal sacrifice that it took to bring the Kowalski case to trial on your behalf. It seems like you're not going to get paid on that for a while until the appeals are exhausted or whatever they're going to do. And you've been fighting now for the Kushers since 2021 with no resolution. So how are you surviving under this massive financial burden of all these expenses of these cases that I know are very, they're costly? What motivates you to keep going, and how are you staying afloat?
Well, how I'm staying afloat is the love and support of my family and my partners, and particularly my partner, John Glenn, and our South Florida office. And I have to give a shout out to our clients as well, because this is a plaintiff case, and most of my clients are defense clients. And they were actually, they understand I don't take many of these cases, and I take cause cases for the most part. And they were like, go get them. You're not losing us. So that helped. I've got a good practice that way, and I've got partners who continue to keep the firm going. That was part of the story. The other part of the story was Jen and I have had to make some rather, it's very upsetting to me what my family's had to go through with this. Not only with us, without having Daddy around, and to a certain extent, with Jen being so involved, but we downsized our lifestyle. We had a home on the Intercoastal, which we loved, but it cost a lot of money to live there. And right at the peak of this, about 18 months ago, we decided we needed to downsize. So we sold our home. Now we did well with it, but we downsized considerably in our home. It's still very nice the one we're in, but it's nothing like being on the Intercoastal. So the family's made incredible sacrifices, and I have to tell you that Megan, that there are a lot of times I think about it and wonder why did I ever take these cases?
I bet.
There's got to be easier ways to make a buck,
Oh, well, it's not about that, obviously, because you don't sell your house and downsize and to keep going. It's just so you can keep going if you were doing it for the money. And let's hope that some of that J Hatch money comes through soon. After Kowalski and now Kushner, do you think that this pattern of hospitals using DCF to report child abuse when there's conflicting information in the records is actually a method to avoid medical malpractice claims by shifting the blame to of medical injuries to the parents by alleging this Munchausen or child abuse wherever the hospital may have misstepped or failed in some way?
I absolutely believe that. I think that particularly with Johns Hopkins, but I think that other hospitals in other parts of the state, and for all I know, in other parts of the country, are guilty of this. The way the statutory scheme is set up, there's no downside to picking up the phone and saying, I think there's something wrong here. And the upside is if you've got some parents who are being what you perceive to be a problem or disagreeing with you, or you just don't like them, it's awfully easy to just pick up the phone and all of a sudden that those parents' concerns are no longer with you, the hospital. They are with, how do I keep my kids? And most people do not have the resources to fight this. And as you know, the whole system is set up to be guilty until proven innocent.
Right.
And so one of the things you asked me why I kept going, Megan, it was that I still do. I don't know. I remember in one day I got like 31 different email, texts, and communications telling me I had to continue to do this for people that had had similar situations or knew of people in similar situations or were going through something like this. So it's a widespread problem. And until we do something about the legislation and make it not quite so easy for this to be used as a retaliatory measure, I think it'll still keep going on.
You know, I've been covering these stories for 20 years, and this case meant so much to me because it brought national attention to this problem that I haven't been able to get in 20 years, and people are now finally sitting up and paying attention to it. And it's like they're finally believing it because it was too difficult to believe before that this kind of evil existed. Did you hear about Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania? 70 families have come forward against one child abuse doctor who has falsely accused them of child abuse and Munchausen syndrome by proxy. 70 families, Greg. Sally has a lot more victims as well. I've been digging into some of her victims, and I read somewhere in your filings, I don't remember where now because I've just been buried in it, but I read somewhere that she only needs 3 actions against her to lose her license, her medical license. Well, we've got one now with Maya Kowalski. You've got a second one with the Kushners coming. Is there a third one?
I get contacted all the time about doing something. I've had a couple of dads who spent time in jail because of Sally Smith wrongfully accusing them. Just good, hardworking dads that had a dumb thing happen, no intent whatsoever to harm the child. The child was not really significantly harmed, and yet they found themselves fighting for their very lives and their freedom. So yes, there are those out there. The question is getting to them. Now, I'll say this. One of the things that the Kowalskis have committed to, and we will support as well, is they want to start a foundation. Should we prevail, they want to begin a foundation that provides for 2 things. One is the diagnosis and treatment of CRPS and funding that kind of research. And the second is a defense fund. And to give these families some resources to fight, because it's an unequal battle. You've got the hospital and the state on one side, and you got average American families on the other. And until something is done to have the the equivalent of a high-powered, specialized public defender, I guess, out there to help them. I don't know. I'm not very positive about the system changing. There's too much money to be made and too much benefit to the organizations for this to shut down.
That was something that you didn't really get into during the trial that I was really hoping was going to come out in the Kowalski trial, was how much money is Dr. Sally Smith paid and who pays her? And are there contracts between Suncoast and J Hatch because it's like she takes kids from parents because she's justifying her own existence. She's justifying her job. She's contracted to do exactly what she did to the Kowalskis and to other families. And I don't see how monetizing taking children away from families is any kind of recipe for good things to happen. You monetize something, you're going to get more of it. Yeah? Did you find out anything there about what is the money trail?
Well, okay, so there are, and I don't know how many, I can just tell you in our case alone, there are 3 different subcontractors to the Department of Children and Family, and that do various tasks. Everything from finding ways or where to put kids, to shelter them, to monitoring the children while they're there, to identifying potential victims of child abuse. So you've got all of those folks who are making a buck, and then they tend to be, for instance, in Sally Smith's case, Suncoast, one of them that was a defendant and sued for a while. They were just merely a pass-through, in my view, for Sally Smith's contracting with the state. So Sally Smith was not contracting directly with the state of Florida. She was contracted through Suncoast to be the medical investigator for the child protection team, which is part of, again, a contract basis, I think, the DCF, the State Department. The fact is, though, that at least in Dr. Smith's case, she also has a private practice, a pediatric practice. And then what I could never figure out, Megan, and although Johns Hopkins is a 501c3 and we kept running into roadblocks trying to figure out how Sally Smith got compensated by Johns Hopkins for bringing these kids in as sort of a feeder system. You saw at trial that Johns Hopkins billed $650,000 after $539,000 was for, quote, treating CRPS, which they did not do. So for Johns Hopkins, that's a sizable chunk of change to motivate somebody to keep a child for 97 days and basically just have to sit there. So the question is, where's the quid pro quo? Now, we uncovered an honorarium, we uncovered some basic things, but we never could quite figure out why there was such a rabid pursuit of putting kids in this situation. And I think if you were to go and look at the contracts, I believe that it is based on a per capita. But again, don't quote me on that. I don't think it's just you're hired to do this job, and no matter how many or how few. I think there's some incentivization there.
Well, I do know that it's a federal law that there's money attached to each child taken that releases federal funds. And that state organizations go after those federal funds like their lives depend on it. And that's from the 1997 Adoption and Safe Families Act, which I think was one of the worst things to have happened to the child protection system. But do you have a little bit of time so I can read you some of the questions from the chat? There are a couple of them. Let's see. Some of them are just comments. Kaylee sent a super chat and said, Greg Anderson is the slayer of witches and destroyer of the John Shopkins dragon. It's funny, you guys. Yeah, Kidada Smith says, "Thank you, Anderson, for everything you've done. You're truly the best." And the statement, "They still don't get it. We love you." Kaylee says, "And I'm so tired of hearing about Shopkins." Dirty look towards defense. Loved it.
Whoever came up with the Shopkins stuff was that you, Megan?
It was my chat. It was the chat.
It was fabulous. It was fabulous.
They're so funny. Kudos to Mr. Anderson, says Legal Vices, and his hard work on Maya's case and other cases against J Hatch. And kudos to Megan for her exemplary coverage of these cases. Well, I'll tell you what, this one
Absolutely,
is
Megan.
huge. It's huge. We needed it. Everybody who's been involved in these cases, anyone who's covered these cases, and it doesn't get the attention that you want it to have, having a Netflix documentary and this huge publicized trial is just awesome. Duncan Idaho says, "Mr. Anderson, does the verdict against J Hatch seem like a Band-Aid solution to a much larger problem to you? Is the realistic solution legislation or simply more persistent, relentless litigation as a check against institutions?"
Well, that's a good question. I think 261 million is a pretty potent Band-Aid. I think that, like with many of the ongoing evils, whether it be, cigarettes or of the different areas where you're trying to get somebody making a buck to stop, I think it'll take more than one judgment. I think it'll take a number of them. And I also think that from the influx of litigation, that also brings to the attention of the legislators. Now, I have spoken with the governor, Governor DeSantis, about this. I had a chance to talk to him in person about 2 years ago. He's very much aware of this. And I know that he is working to try to change some of this legislation. So now that I have a little more time, maybe I'll see if I can do a little more that way.
Well, I was thinking that we were going to start a calling campaign to ask him to launch an investigation into Pinellas County. I don't know why there hasn't been a state investigation into that county to find out what the hell is going on over there and why they have 3 times the number of kids taken from parents than any place else.
I thought the exact same thing when I saw that statistic. There's a bar graph out there somewhere that I think Caitlin Keating found, the producer of Take Care of Maya. And I think it was on there, but one look at that bar graph and seeing the incredible number increase that Pinellas County and that district has over other parts of the state, regardless of population, is enough to, one would think, justify a state-level investigation. The other thing is, if federal funding is going towards something that is actually harming the citizens, one would think at the federal level, a legislator or hopefully maybe somebody with the appropriate bureaucracy would look into it, because that's not right to pay people to do to the Kowalskis and the Kushers what was done to them.
No, it isn't. LA says this victory meant so much for chronic pain patients and our families. We appreciate you and your family's hard work and sacrifice, along with the Kowalskis' courage. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. You're a hero to so many.
Thank you very much. I'm happy being a hero to my kids. Hopefully I am. I think I am. But I do very much appreciate all the support. I have to say, there were some dark days through the course of this case, and even through the trial, when all of the support I was receiving from different folks, it kept me going. So back at you. I appreciate it very much. It helped knowing there were so many folks out there cheering us on, and for the chronic pain sufferers out there, CRPS and otherwise. It is just such a horrific existence, and something that I don't know a lot of people know about, but I've actually got photographs of them here somewhere. But Maya, after a few weeks of this trial, started to get those terrible lesions on her ankles, and particularly right ankle, and we were completely freaked out about that because I just, a relapse from this amount of stress and then having it ongoing was terrifying. And it can strike at any time. And for those folks out there, just stay with it, stay up with the treatments, do your best. There are people out there that understand and believe you, and we'll help you when we can.
Your team appears to be one of the first teams in a high-profile case that seem to be leaning into the YouTube creators and granting interviews to channels that aren't mainstream press. First, I want to thank you because that's huge. But secondly, we watched court TV and Law and Crime be hostile to Johnny Depp and to Maya. Are the days of, do you think, court TV and mainstream press dominating the conversation coming to an end? Is the veneer of the mainstream press finally fading?
Yes, and I think that people have wised up about where and how to get information. I think that the YouTube shows, because you have so much more freedom, are being sought out by people who need to know and want to know what's going on. I also believed I was very upset at another hospital who shall remain nameless, and as well as a paper that came out with the paper that came out with some points that the defense had obviously provided them with, which had absolutely nothing to do with the facts and nothing to do with what was going on. And it was a hit job. And I actually saw one of the reporters who I'd given an interview to several days before, and I said, "No, I do for you, and this is what happens." So I don't think it was the reporter. I think it was the editorial board. But my question is, what is that editorial board doing sending out a hit piece like that with such a tragic case? And I think that kind of reporting, it makes you question where, I want to say where their heart is at. That's not the right way to put it, but where their mind is at.
Well, the same day, Greg, that there was the big IJ bomb in the courtroom, the very same day, Court TV decided that their article was going to be about Maya's homecoming dress and accusing her of lying about her illness because she managed to go out with some friends. That was their story, and they never did report on the IJ report, Greg. Not once. What kind of media coverage is that? It's outrageous.
Why? On one hand, you could look at it and say, well, they're just looking for a story, a controversy. But isn't this a big enough controversy? Telling it straight.
Yes.
Do you have to create more controversy here and attack, a 17-year-old girl? Maya was attacked through this entire period of time. From the time she's 9 on, she has been under constant attack by media, by the hospital, by defense lawyers. When is this kid finally able to live a life? To the extent, with what's happened to her, she can. It is. Do you know that the defense insisted on an order such that Maya had to report to the defense lawyers every time she went to any kind of doctor or dental or any other appointment.
Ugh.
This kid could not even go and get her teeth cleaned without having to report it. Think about that.
And she couldn't seek any therapy because then they would just get the therapy notes. So nothing she said was private. Nothing she ever talked about stayed between her and her therapist. And then they had the nerve to say, well, they don't really have PTSD because they're not seeking out help. well, you're stalking them, so how could they possibly seek out help?
Jackie Henschke is a brilliant pediatric psychiatrist and Stanford trained, and she had no dog in this hunt. I met her completely apart from any of this, and she had just heard about the case, and I asked her to give a hand, and she was nice enough to agree. But our whole idea here was a safe harbor, to give Maya a safe harbor where she could talk and perhaps start a little bit on the path back to a semi-normal life. And I said, this is all part of the record. I know, Megan, you probably know all this, but I announced nothing that Maya says in here is going to be used. We agree that she will never be called as a witness. Maya needs a safe harbor. Give this kid one place she can go to talk. And that, of course, lasted about as long as it took to get a hearing and a motion filed in a hearing. And the next thing you know, Jackie Henschke's involved in it. And then they had the gall to object once they forced to turn over all the records and started going after Dr. Henschke. Then they got really mad when I said, well, fine, Dr. Henschke's going to testify.
That's
Dr.
sick.
Henschke had also documented what had happened to Maya that we talked about in the proffer. So be careful what you wish for, you will surely get it, right?
That's disgusting. The way the defense behaved is disgusting. And I don't mean to be crass, but we gave them a nickname here. We call them the Dick Defense. Because we hated the way that they behaved. They were horrible the whole time. And by the way, if it does come up in appeal and you need some photographic evidence that the DCF and JHatch threw Jesus and chocolate cake in the trash, I have it. We have investigative evidence here.
Can I supplement a brief with that?
Yeah, I thought you might be able to. That might come in handy.
Finally found proof, judges. That is fabulous.
I think that angered the audience more than anything, that they took this child's consecrated host and threw it in the dumpster along with her chocolate cake. For what purpose other than torturing a kid do you do this?
Why would you do that? What was the thought process that that somehow the Kowalskis were going to find an illegal source of ketamine and then bake it into cookies and bake it in union wafers, adulterate the holy water, and then find a way to sneak it in?
It's absurd. Not to mention, I don't know if you're Catholic or not, but it's an automatic excommunication if you were to desecrate a host like that with ketamine. So Beata would know that. She would know that if she put anything on a consecrated host, it's an automatic excommunication. She would never have done that. She was a devout Catholic.
Of course. And the thought processes that looking for the right term here, but the internal psychosis that developed amongst these people involved at Johns Hopkins and the DCF folks right there with them, Sally Smith, there was never, as far as I could tell, there was never anyone who came in and said, wait a second. No, we're not going to allege that they're putting ketamine in muffins and sending them in with 10-year-olds. No, we're not going to pin down a kid and strip them. There just seemed to be absolutely nobody at home to run this thing. No captain of this ship. It was astounding to me. And then you think, and these people are taking care of people's kids. I mean, not just Maya, but bad news.
Very bad news. Greg, thank you so much for being with me today. I know you had just about an hour and we're about done. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on this channel. I know we're just a small channel, but this audience really are your people. They've been behind Maya this entire time. We have been for her. We've been trying to get the word out. And just please tell her that we love her and we believe her. We believe her 100%. Please tell her.
Absolutely. And Megan, and to all of your viewers, thank you so much. The Kowalskis are so much aware of the support here, and they wanted me to pass along how much they appreciate it. And, great
Wonderful.
job uncovering it. Just great job.
Wonderful. Well, please, let's keep in touch about the Kushner case, because I would like to keep up on that and follow it and report on it. And thank you for your time today, Greg. I appreciate it. And have a great rest of your day taking it to the enemy. I know you're working hard.
I'll do my best.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.